Great, excellent. Hello, divestment campaign organizers. I'm really excited to be here with you with the Act and Absorb webinar. We're going to get rolling in a second, but first we're going to introduce the training team. This is a training team. My name is PD Gantert. I'm the Southwest Network organizer with the Divestment Student Network. I go to school at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I care a lot about action and absorption. One, because it's awesome, but two, I care a lot about this in particular because I've had some experiences with my own campaign last year where we were able to build really big actions and failed to absorb out of them, which is a total bummer. And I've learned some things through those experiences, and I'm excited to share them with you today. And I'm going to pass it over to Sophia.
Hi, my name is Sophia. I'm a sophomore at Swarthmore College. I organize with Swarthmore Mountain Justice. And I'm super excited to talk about Act, Recruit, Train today because I basically got involved in the divestment campaign at Swarthmore during a really successful Act, Recruit, Train cycle that Swarthmore Mountain Justice had planned. And yeah, so I basically, after PCM, so 200 Swarthmore students were involved at the People's Climate March in New York City, and there was a lot of excitement on campus, and lots of people piled into the bus to go. And the campaign really used this moment to engage me and to engage others and to grow the organization. And so I'm basically here today because of one of those powerful moments where there's a lot of excitement that we use to strengthen our campaigns and our communities. So most of us know how powerful it can be to participate in collective action or to feel like a part of a great movement. It's empowering, it's inspiring, and it allows us to show our power to the public and our targets. And it's a great strategic opportunity for our campaigns. So that's why moments like today, when the escalation that we're currently building for ourselves this spring are so important because we can use them to absorb intentionally and effectively in order to build capacity that we need to move our groups and campaigns toward our goals and vision. And so this training is about giving you the tools that you need to do that.
Great. So this webinar is one of 4, and it's also being accompanied by some toolkits. And it's designed to help students who are already planning on escalating their campaigns to do so more effectively and more powerfully. And we're going to get right into that. But first, I'd like to take a second to welcome Jess to the call, who's going to be supporting us today.
Hi y'all, my name is Jess Grady-Benson. I'm the Director of Training with the Divestment Student Network, and I'm here today to support PD and Sophia in leading this training with y'all. And I am a graduate of Pitzer College, class of 2014, helped start and lead the campaign there that won in the spring of 2014. And so I very much deeply believe in the importance of building our campaigns through these exciting moments of high-intensity momentum, but also have learned many times what happens when we don't think about and plan for how to absorb energy and student power out of those moments. And of course, as the Director of Training, I believe deeply in the importance of training, building our skills and learning how to effectively organize and strategize, but also creating transformational experiences together and building relationships as a team for more sustainable organizers and individuals and collectively as campaign teams. So thanks for having me on, and I'll pass it back to PD and Sophia. And I also want to remind all of you who are watching right now, thank you for joining us. Please engage with the webinar throughout the call today using the Q&A box, which you'll find a little button on the top of your viewing window to ask some questions, and we're going to ask you some questions as well. So please engage with us. And if you could start off by writing in that box, what's your name, what school you're coming from, and where are you at right now. So thanks for joining us. And I'll pass it back to our trainers.
Great. So like I said earlier, we are here because our movement is going to launch itself into the second national round of coordinated escalated action. So what that means is we're coming out from under the ground, and we're going to do it big. And I'm excited to do it big because my campus, CU Boulder, did it big last year, and it really was a pretty profound moment that changed my life. Seeing I mean, I think that we engaged 250 people or 300 people over the last 2 months of school in direct actions at the University of Colorado. And seeing that as the fruit of my work was really a moment that helped me solidify my identity as an organizer. And today we're here to add a tool to the toolbox. We're going to talk about absorbing out of action and how to use that absorption in planning future action. And I think that a really good place to start is to recognize why we're not doing this in the first place. And to start with that, I would like to talk about this intersection that our movement is currently sitting in, and we are adopting frameworks and frameworks and tools from many different schools of organizing, and this is a good place to start talking about it. And I'm going to use a story about my campaign or our experience as a way to root these two examples. So today we're going to be talking about how we are building the power with our campaigns through relationships, through organizing people, through one-on-one relationships, right? Turning out your friends, working with your core teams. And also how we're building powerful campaigns through these peak moments of hype and these huge moments of escalation like we're launching into right now. So we're going to talk about structure organizing and momentum organizing. And last year at my school, we had this grand plan of doing all of our base building work in the fall. So we're going to build our base, we're just going to tuck them away, and then in the spring we're totally going to throw them out and launch ourselves into big action, right? And that was the plan. So in the fall, when people came around and they asked, how do I get involved? We said, join our organization. You care about climate justice, we care about climate justice too. You want to work on divestment, join Fossil Free CU, which is not a bad ask, right? But we had this experience of people would show up to meetings and it was just flat because it was hard for them to get engaged and know how to get going. And then in the spring, when it came around, right, we managed to have some actions, but the people we were turning out were just our friends. So in the spring, we had this moment of escalation, this huge series of actions, and it was all about the hype. Everybody was talking about fossil fuel divestment. So when people asked, how could we get involved? We said, come to the action, right? It's exciting. Get involved. Everybody's doing it. This is how you onboard into this movement that we're building, which was great. We built the hype. But we also found ourselves in a position where at the end of all that hype, we had nobody left in our organization. We had built these giant actions, and we weren't able to absorb and retain people into those actions. And I think that happened in large part because we took for granted all that hype and energy and movement that we had built on our campus. We thought that if we could turn out 250 people, that of course those people have to get involved, right? Here's all these people, why wouldn't they get involved? But the reality was, we didn't give them the on-ramps, that we didn't have the tools that we needed to give other people the on-ramps that they needed to get involved. So I think that this story really, it's nothing special. This is a story that I think a lot of you can identify with. And if you would like to share some of your experiences in the chat, we'd love to hear them, because I think that, like I said, this story is nothing special. And it's the reason that we, as a movement, need to be tackling this challenge together. So I would like to engage all of you in this conversation right now, because I think everybody can relate to what I just said. And in large part, Fossil Free CU just failed to recognize that we were in a very special moment, and a moment that wasn't going to last forever, and that the right thing to do in that situation was do everything we can to recruit and train those people so we could bring them into our organization at the moment. But we didn't recognize that. So I'd like to invite you all to share a moment in the chat, in the Q&A box, of when your campaign has had a similar experience of being in a moment of momentum where all the hype and energy and buzz is happening around campus, and whether or not you went ahead and were able to retain those people, or whether you, like us, found ourselves pretty much alone with the same core people that we had a year ago, despite all this exciting action. So we're going to wait for a second and give you all an opportunity to respond to that. And Jess, I think that you are, I'm not on the chat right now, so if there's responses coming in, could you share them with us?
So if there are any folks who are also viewing from YouTube right now and aren't able to engage in the Q&A box on Google+, you can also tweet at us with the hashtag EscalationCoreWebinar. So please engage with us on the Q&A box and on Twitter.
Okay, so the story that I shared, and we're going to dig into these stories a little bit more because I'm excited to share some details, but really what happened is we found ourselves in a surge of momentum, or a moment of momentum. And to be honest with you, we didn't know what to do about it. We had turned out 250 people over the course of 2 months, and we were surprised that the team of 8 or 10 at the time was even able to do that. We had built power on our campus, and we moved our administrators, our decision makers, from feeling that the campaign was totally irrelevant to this is something that needs to be addressed, and all of a sudden we were getting invited to meetings. And like I said earlier, we didn't even recognize that this was a special moment and that we needed to do the work of retaining those people who are showing up for us and showing up at our actions. And we're about to enter this. I think that this webinar could not be better timed because we are about to enter into another period of national hype and momentous escalation, right? And campaigns all across the country, whether it be from Swarthmore or from the University of Denver to Bowdoin, are all going to be escalating, and divestment's going to be in the news. And it took a lot of hard work to get there, right? It's semesters or years of working inside of our core teams, building strong relationships with the people that we really care about and organize with on the day-to-day basis. And then finally, these campaigns can explode, not only just on our own campuses, but also center stage in the national conversation around climate justice organizing. So we need to be really intentional when we think about what we need to do ahead of time in order to set ourselves up to absorb that momentum well and pull it into our organization, so that way we don't find ourselves in the position that Fossil Free CU found itself last year, where after semesters and months of really really just like from my gut organizing, standing alone with the same people that we found ourselves last year. And I know that we can learn to do these better, and I'm excited to dig into this today. So I'd like to introduce the framework that we're going to be talking about for this webinar called Act, Recruit, Train. I'll say it again, it's Act, Recruit, Train. We're going to take action, we're going to recruit people, and then we're going to train them, and we're going to take action again. And this is a framework for how we think about not only taking action, but also developing our organizations so we can take more action and bigger action together, moving forward. And Act, Recruit, Train sits, for me, at the core of base building, at the core of organizational development, because it's about always having on-ramps for people beyond the core team members who we know are going to be around. So it's the people who are not regularly engaging with the campaign to demonstrate their commitment to not only your campaign, but also demonstrate the way that they want to show up for their values about climate justice and take leadership in the campaign. Whether it's high leadership in that moment of momentum we you're talking about, when you're in the sit-in or when you're at the huge rally, or even low levels of commitment that match where the campaign is going to be at. Like I'm thinking about what happens to our campaigns during finals week, or when the campaign escalated and had a really disappointing loss. So I'm going to pass it off to Sophia to talk about and walk us through the Act, Recruit, Train framework as a tool.
Yeah, thanks, PD. So PD just shared a story about a time when his campaign experienced a surge of momentum, and so we're just going to kind of graph what those surges of momentum can look like over time. So as PD just explained, we can think about act, recruit, train as kind of this cycle where, like, at the top of the circle, you're acting. There's this moment of momentum, and it's super exciting. Then you recruit people coming off of that action, and then train them, and it all begins again. And you can kind of, if you think about this cycle occurring again and again over time, we can kind of graph that onto a line graph.
So Sophia, could I ask you to hold that up a little bit higher? Because I think the name tags are blocking it at the bottom.
Sorry. So that was the circle. And here we have the line graph of PD's campaign, Fossil Free CU. So yeah, PD, would you like to just walk us through the story of your campaign last year and what these different arcs of act, recruit, and train are representing?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, I'd just like to recognize that there are people who shared about their own experiences with moments of momentum. So before I share my story, I'd just like to read some of the responses we got. Curtis says, "We held a rally during the homecoming weekend at the university's presidential speech. We had some great conversations with alumni and parents, but failed to follow up with them." And Julio says, "This is my first semester in divestment at my school, and we are currently working on spring action. We did do one public art project about transparency, but then didn't really tell a story alongside of it." And what I'm guessing is also like having the staying power out of that action and pulling people into the organization. So thank you all so much for sharing those stories, because I think that this is it's something that I still struggle with after organizing for, I don't know, 3 years on this divestment campaign, and I still have a lot to learn about, and I'm excited to share what I've learned. So we're going to listen to a tale of great triumph and disappointment from the headquarters of Fossil Free CU. So I'm going to just like give you the overview. We had 3 big actions last spring. We took some actions in the fall, but it was all about the spring. Because remember, we did this base building, and then we like tried to turn them out, but it like only sort of worked. So we engaged in the Global Day of Divestment Action, and I know it's quite possible that some of your campaigns also engaged in that day. And it was huge for us because we were able to turn out 60 people, which was more people than we had ever turned out to an action ahead of time. So the action was we had this teach-in, and then we took everybody out and we did this rally. And after that, about a week later, we had this Board of Regents meeting. And our regents are much like your trustees. And we were like, yo, people who showed up to Global Day of Divestment, we really need you. Now that you all know about it, you had the teach-in, we need you to show up and throw down on this Board of Regents meeting, because right now our campaign is not even being acknowledged by the people that we need it to be acknowledged to, the decision makers. So we turned 100 people out to that action, and it was like so awesome, because the meeting room that these regents have their meetings in is right on campus, but it's never advertised. And nobody ever shows up to it because it's not advertised. And there's only 40 seats in the meeting room. So turning 100 people and packing a meeting room that these regents are accustomed to having nobody showing up to was it just like, the feeling of being able to organize that project was incredible. And then also recognizing that those decision makers were scared when we walked in the room, because we just saw the look on their faces. They had never seen 100 people step into a room. And then out of the Global Day of Divestment and out of the Board of Regents meeting, we also were on the Escalation Corps last year. And we threw down as a part of the string of nationally coordinated actions, just like many of you. And we occupied the largest quad on campus for 3 days, and held rallies and teach-ins and speeches and poetry, like open mic nights, and it was really great and beautiful. And I'd say that it's really difficult to track how many people that we engaged with that, but it was like, 150 or 200 folks over 3 days of camping out in the quad.
Awesome, thanks, PD. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what happened at the end of your camp out in the quad? Did you all recruit and train coming out of that?
Yeah, so we had some problems, some bumps along the way. And I think that over the course of the entire semester, it was successful. And something that I'll say about my campaign that I'm really proud of is we, as we like to say, we hashtag get results, almost at no cost, right? And I don't encourage that because it leads to incredible amounts of burnout. But this campaign really knows how to throw down when push comes to shove. And we did a pretty good job out of the first action and going into the second, because we were like, yo, we got this big action coming up, like teach-in people. We really need you to turn out a month from now, or a week from now. And people were like, sure, I'll show up a week from now, and they totally showed up. So that was our recruitment into the action. We had a little mini training before the action, so people knew how to engage with the Board of Regents meeting, and then we all went into the room and kind of scared the pants off of our decision makers. And out of that, we had 6 whole weeks in between this quad occupation, and we were like moving things with our targets, and we were like hammering away at our Facebook page, and we were doing almost everything right, except those 100 people that showed up to the Board of Regents meeting were not asked to engage with the campaign in any way during that 6-week stretch. And our rationale behind that was, you know what, people are busy, they got midterms, and we don't want to ask too much of people by not only asking them to turn out, but to also help us build the action. So we're like, if they turn out, that's good enough. We don't need their help to build it, so we'll just build it all by ourselves. I think this is a story that we tell ourselves, right? Because if you think about it, it's actually backwards. And if people don't have a way to stay engaged with the campaign, they just don't engage with the campaign, right? So we had the same story out of this big action. And we didn't act, recruit, train our way to the big action. And I think we got really lucky because it was still huge. And then at the end of the action, everybody was exhausted because we had built it ourselves, because we did not build our organization. And everybody, I think that we really didn't even anticipate what needed to happen afterwards, and we found ourselves scrambling to figure out what to do with these folks, and really just didn't wind up building our organization at all. And we started this fall with fewer core team members than we started the previous fall, even though we had turned out hundreds of people over the course of the last year.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that story, PD. I guess one question I have for you is, what do you think is something that you could have done coming out of the Regents meeting to better absorb the momentum that you all had generated?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we took action together, and that was cool. But we weren't able to, like, we didn't even try to recruit, and we certainly didn't try to train these people. And if I were to redo that string of actions, I would really think about ways that I could complete that cycle of act, recruit, and train, and then act again. And the act doesn't always have to be an action. Sometimes it is an action, but acting with the campaign, and we'll get more specific about these definitions in a second. But we needed help. Like, we had flyers to hang, we had class raps to give, we had phone banks that needed mouths and ears on. We could have used help making action art. We could have used support in pulling together logistics for this big spring action, and we totally ignored the base of people that were showing up for us and offering to help. So if I were to think about doing it over again, I'd be thinking about the ways that we could have built the relationships that we needed with those people who turned up for us, by inviting them to engage with the campaign right now. They were stoked after the Board of Regents meeting, and we should have been like, yo, this is so dope, right? We're getting hyped for this even bigger action that's coming later in the spring, and this is how you can plug in and help. And then we can split up in groups, and we can train them how to do these small pieces of the campaign. And there's lots of ways to go about that, but I'm learning a lot from the fact that we turned away the people that were showing up to help by saying, we don't want to ask you to do anything for the campaign other than just show up for us.
Yeah, that's a really great observation, PD. So it sounds like one thing that you're kind of pulling out is that there's a difference between building hype and actually building an organization. So So sometimes our organizations can stay the same size, even if, even though there's just so much hype, so much momentum, recruitment may not be quite enough to really absorb new people into the campaign if we're not giving them skills and building the relationships that empower them to stay committed. And so one thing that I heard you say kind of with this third action with your really escalated sit-in was that it's really hard when you're kind of just like throwing everything into planning this escalated action. It takes a lot of capacity to do that. Sometimes you can feel really burned out by the end and you feel like you just don't have the capacity to then turn around and plan the recruit train part of your cycle. So I guess one question I have for you is, what do you think a solution to like prevent situations like that from happening could be?
I can just I can even see myself last year. We had a campaign coach named Youngjung, and I think that even some of you might know Youngjung, and she is the best. And she's at these actions, and she's pushing us in our planning process, and she's saying, PD, this is a really incredible action, and I'm proud of all of you, and I think that it's going to be successful. And also, what about all of these follow-up meetings, or what are the next steps that you can give to the people who are looking to engage? Well, what is the ask of the campaign, not only for the target, but also for the people that are showing up right now? How can they get involved right now? Do you have that planned out? And I looked at her and I was like, I'm exhausted, and I really appreciate your support, but right now this just feels like a lot. It feels like way too much. Because the truth was, I wasn't even thinking about how we're going to engage these people after they showed up for us. And I think that would have made a world of a difference for me and for the campaign if the very intentional steps to recruit and train the people after acting with them were pre-planned into the action, rather than us scrambling to do something as an add-on every single time we took action together.
Yeah, that sounds super smart. It's really great. Thank you. So I think that one thing that PD really pulled out just now is that people stay involved because of their relationship to our campaign. So either they have an interest in the issue, or they have an interest in the relationships that they've built through the campaign. And Act, Recruit, Train cycles really give us the opportunity to deepen both of those. So after you've done one Act, Recruit, Train cycle and your organization has grown, you have more capacity, whether your organization grew in numbers or maybe you strengthened the existing team with members that you already had taking on greater roles and bringing more people from your periphery into your base. And so, yeah, once you finish one cycle, then you can plan out the next and do it again, hope bigger and better the next time. Yeah. So I'll pass it off to PD to talk more about what each, the sections of acting, recruiting, and training look like.
Yeah, so I care about this tool a lot because y'all know what? We pulled off some really big stuff last year, and we were proud of ourselves. And at the very end of the day, we felt like we didn't have much to show for it. And people, we had turned out hundreds of people in the several months leading up to the end of the school year. And the core team was meeting, where did all of these people go? And if you are with me right now I am so tired of not retaining any of these people that were able to turn out, and I am really down to act, recruit, and train my way to victory, that is awesome. And if you're looking at me and saying, that sounds like a good deal, but I'm still confused about how we recruit and train these people in consistent ways, we're going to dive into that a little bit right now. So Sophia, if I could ask you to hold the Act, Recruit, Train circle up one more time. We're going to take a look at this. It's simple. There's 3 steps. You take action together, you recruit out of that action, and then you train people to take action again. So let's get specific about what we mean. Thanks, Sophia. That's okay. When we say take action. Now, I want to be really clear. This is not a webinar about strategy. The regional networks and the support that the DSN is getting from 350 and all the mentorship that we have to give to each other are much better places to go for campaign strategy. And I say that because when you take action together with other folks in your campaign, it should really come from a place of being deeply rooted in your strategy and thinking about how you need to move your campaign towards the goals that you have set way ahead of time, right? So we can be really creative, and we'll talk about this towards the end of the call about how this tool can be flexible and we can work with it to really suit what we need right now. But the actions that we take really need to be strategic. But we can think about how we're taking those actions in order to make them more conducive to recruitment and training out of them. So we're going to work together on this recruit part. The question that we have to answer together is how can we make sure that we recruit as many people as possible after this action, this upcoming action? And we could even be workshopping the escalated actions that y'all are working on right now. So I'm going to give some examples, but I also want y'all to share some ideas that you have through the chat, through the Twitter, of ways that we can get really creative about moving people from an action into future engagement with the campaign. So the three examples that I have to share are quarter sheets of paper. This is like a thing, right? You can give somebody a flyer, you can give people a quarter sheet of paper with the next steps of how to get involved with the campaign. I said this can be creative. That is 100% not creative, and that is like the cut and dry kind of way to engage people with the campaign. This is how you do it. Something that I'm taking from the Swarthmore Mountain Justice campaign that I just think is absolutely brilliant is they used to sit down and pre-make packets, of the orange squares that we see floating all over our movement, and all of the safety pins, right? So you got the orange squares, you got the safety pins, everybody's handing these out anyway. But they used to stuff baggies. I mean, maybe Sophia should tell the story, but stuff baggies with 5 or 10 of these orange squares, some info about divestment, and then, Sophia, how did this play out? People would roll around your campus and like the engagement with the campaign is handing out these orange squares, right?
Yeah, so the baggies were before my time, but since I've been here, we still do use the orange squares. We often will have those available just at open meetings or actions to hand out to people so that they can show their divestment pride and then have people ask questions about it and generate that conversation.
Yeah, people are taking like meaningful. Now it seems simple, right? Like all you're doing is handing out squares and having conversations. But that is a meaningful way that we can engage people, a meaningful step of engagement out of an action. You show up to an action, help get the word out about Fossil Free CU, about Swarthmore Mountain Justice. And the last freebie that I'm going to give y'all is an immediate next steps flyer. And if somebody's up on the megaphone, right, it's just like even telling people this is how you get engaged, and then having that person with the clipboard, because y'all need to be collecting contact information if you're not out of your actions. So that way people know how to get engaged, and they're getting a follow-up phone call to engage with the campaign like 2 or 3 days after they come to an action. So I'm going to stop and pause, and I would love to hear some more ideas that y'all have about ways that we can recruit out of our actions. And we have the long pause because technology is wonderful, and Google is doing us a fine service, but it takes about 45 seconds for us to see your responses after you've submitted them. So, Jess, I'm wondering if we have anything rolling in yet.
We don't have any additional comments coming in, but we do have one question from Curtis.
Yeah, would
And
you
if
like
you
to
want
read
to take
it?
that now, we can do that. Yeah, great. So Curtis from University of Puget Sound, which is like an hour away from where I am right now in Seattle. We have a coalition that consists of 27 different groups or clubs or fraternities and sororities. I have a feeling that many of these groups signed the coalition expecting that that would be the extent of their engagement. Curtis asks, is it fair to ask them to participate more?
So I have a half an answer for that, Sophia, but do you have something to say first?
Go for it, PD. Maybe I'll follow you up.
Okay. So, Curtis, I think that this is a legit question. People, and actually, I'm gonna try to try to sink this into the framework for a second. People took action. They signed a letter, right? It's meaningful action, and it's so meaningful that they thought that this was like the most that they were going to have to do, right? Like they're saying, yes, this is meaningful to me. So we acted, and now we need to think about how we're recruiting and training these people to take future action. So you're like right here with us, and I think that the tool can help us think about this. Because when I'm thinking about this, I would say, Curtis, do you even, like, in the first place, want these groups to be involved in the campaign? And I think it's a good place to start. And I assume we're going to base this off of the answer being yes. But a question that I would ask myself is, okay, these people are at like a pretty low level of engagement with the campaign. What do we have already coming up with the campaign? What do we foresee coming on the horizon of our strategy? And how can we build an on-ramp for engagement that's just like one step higher than where these people are at right now? Right? So we probably can't ask them to come join us in a sit-in, but how could we, in and amongst the sit-in, think about another way for these people to get involved that is also meaningful for them beyond just signing this petition? So for me, that might look like, I mean, honestly, even just like sharing and doing some of the social media work. That might look like supporting your organization by cooking, and we're going to roll with this sit-in, by cooking and delivering a meal to the people who are sitting in. It might look like joining a rally for 30 minutes on an afternoon. Right? So I think it absolutely is fair to ask for these people to stay involved with the campaign, and now it's up for you to figure out how these people would want to engage, because obviously they might not be in a place where they're thinking about engaging in the first place. Sophia, do you have anything to add?
No, I totally agree with that, PD. We're about to get into the ladder of engagement in a moment, but I really liked what you pointed out about like what's an ask that you could make of these people that's just like one step up, like one a little bit more requires a little bit more dedication. And it seems like with your situation where okay, so they've signed something saying that they're part of a coalition, maybe have they signed your petition for divestment if you have one, or have they liked your Facebook page, kind of like what PD was saying. Then from there, maybe they'll come to an open meeting. Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah, I want to just add quickly onto what Sophia just shared, which I think is a super important point, that when we think about building our base and recruiting, we want to think about moving folks who are in more of a passive state of engagement with our campaign to being more active participants. And that can be as low a level of engagement as signing a petition, sharing something on social media, making a donation, or showing up to a rally. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily locking down or dedicating 20 hours a week. That's more of like a core position, right? So in these moments of escalation, we grow enormously in a short amount of time, and then a lot of those people walk away. And a lot of those people walk away because they don't think that they're necessary to the campaign. And so I think one of the most common mistakes that I've seen student organizers take, and that I took many a time when I was still a student, is actually not asking people for fear that they would say no. And a lot of those folks aren't stepping up more because they don't see themselves in the campaign as a necessary part of it. And that's where the relationship building comes in. That's where those asks are really crucial, to make people see that actually they are needed and there's a clear place for them to plug in. So that's a really great question, and thanks for asking it, Curtis.
So I'm glad that we took the second to answer that question because Abby replied to our request for recruitment tools. And Abby says, following up with those people who turned out to your action with one-on-ones, and you could do these over a meal or they could be casual. And I think that, yeah, like peer-to-peer, like one-on-one connection with a campaign is an incredibly strong way to bring that person into the organization. And I'd absolutely recommend doing that for the people that just stand out as like, oh my gosh, you showed up at our action and we need you in this organization. We really want you around. And Abby, I think that that's a phenomenal tool to continue bringing people into the organization. And I also want to think about ways that we can engage people in a way that takes less time, because last year, between February, the last week of February and the first week of April, Fossil Free CU engaged 250 people. And maybe we could build a team to go out and do 250 one-on-ones, but we also need to get crafty about how we can engage people on the fly and in a way that like really meets them, or not meets them where they're at, but like really engages them in a meaningful way to them. So we're going to recruit people from the action. We had the action. We talked about these recruitment tools, and now we're going to train people. And I'm going to tell you what didn't work for me. Fossil Free CU was like, oh, you came to an action. You want to come to a weekend-long strategy retreat, and we can tell you about how to run this organization. And nobody showed up. So we were a little bit confused when we talked about train. And maybe a weekend-long strategy retreat is a good first step for a very special person. But most people who show up to an action aren't looking to devote their entire lives to divestment just yet. Give them a couple of months. So we need to train people for immediate engagement with the campaign, right? They don't need to know everything about how to run the organization. They need to know how to support the work right now. So maybe that person's like, I got like mad class rapping skills, right? Like I am a bomb public speaker. And you're like, cool, you give them a 5-minute training on the messaging and the next steps for what's coming up with the campaign, and now that person who's excited to go out and do class raps for your organization knows how to engage with the campaign in that way. Or everybody loves to, like, I don't know, I like to paint banners. People like to paint banners. So now you just like help somebody run their own banner painting session or like sidewalk chalking session leading up to your next big action. Okay, so we're still talking about the tool, but we are going to close out on tool basics, and I'm excited to invite y'all into Act Recruit Train 201. We're going there. Get ready. Hang on, because we are going to figure out how to plan multiple Act Recruit Train cycles in advance, and not just use them as like a once and done, but as an integral, a tool that we deeply integrate into our strategy. So every time we take action, we're expanding our base, we're deepening our leaders' development, and like strengthening the organization that is moving these actions and driving these actions in the first place. So I pass it back to Sophia. Unless, yeah.
Yeah, so as we go through these Act Recruit Train cycles, we often think of them as recruiting more people and turning larger numbers of people out to our events. But we can and should, like we were just talking about, also be thinking about how Act Recruit Train cycles can help us strengthen the leadership of people who are already in our campaigns and bring them up to whatever that next level ask is going to be. So we need to support people in taking on more leadership in our campaigns by giving them meaningful ways to engage and grow. And we can do this by bringing people up the ladder of engagement. And what I mean by that is that Act Recruit Train cycles, when paired with the ladder of engagement, can be used to develop more leaders and capacity for our campaigns. So when I say ladder of engagement, really you can just picture a ladder, and what we were talking about with, for example, Curtis's school, when we had people who were signed on to the coalition, that was like rung number 1, and maybe signing the divestment petition would be rung number 2, and then coming to an open meeting, rung number 3. So you can just think of like things people can do that just take a little bit more engagement and a little bit more dedication. So I'm going to reference a story that I started telling at the very beginning about how I was brought into Swarthmore's campaign. So when we went to the People's Climate March, on the van ride back to campus, Mountain Justice had printed out quarter sheets that basically said, 200 Swatis marched at the People's Climate March, come find out what's next. So they were handing out these quarter sheets with a time and a place saying when the next meeting would be, and they delegated sort of like van captains, and I was one of those people. So I was asked to go and stand at the front of the van and announce that this meeting was going to be happening. So that was one way that I was brought up one rung of the ladder. So afterwards, when I went to that training, we were trained about how we could talk to divestment to different people, whether or not those people were already allies, or maybe they were against divestment, what was the best way to talk to them. And I was asked to maybe talk about divestment to other groups that I was a part of on campus, like the women's rugby team. And going back to what I was suggested, around that same time, several people, over the course of a few weeks, several people who were more involved in the campaign asked to have one-on-one meals with me, and so I developed relationships with them that way. And I think that that also gave them an opportunity to learn more about me and gauge, like, what would the next rung up for me be, because that's something that can vary person to person, just depending on what people are more or less comfortable with. Like, talking at a rally might be just one rung up for one person, and it might be 5 rungs up for another person. And so the next thing that I engaged with was making flyers for an event. And then after that, I joined the Corps, and I started being involved in longer strategy meetings on the weekends. And so one point that I'd like to make is that I was a really excited freshman, and I went to a lot of different interest meetings. I could have ended up involved in any number of different groups. I could have left Mountain Justice mid-freshman fall. But I think because of the way that the Mountain Justice Corps kind of intentionally brought me up the ladder and developed relationships with me, I developed like a growing commitment to the campaign, and really found what my stake was in the campaign. So this story shows that Act, Recruit, Train is a way to bring people up the ladder of engagement, and big actions can provide a really great opportunity, not just before and during, but especially after, to bring more people into our organizations. And as we go through these Act, Recruit, Train cycles, we often think of them as recruiting more people and turning larger numbers of people out to our events. But we can and should also be thinking about how Act, Recruit, Train can help us strengthen the leadership of people who are already in our campaigns.
Great. That's a really awesome story, Sophia, and really cool to hear about how you rose into greater leadership in your campaign. And I think that's totally true, that these moments can be used to deepen our bench, so to speak, and creates more strength and cohesion amongst the team that we already are building. I want to share at this point a question that seems really pertinent from Simon at University of Montana. He says, would it be too far up the ladder of engagement to ask people at an action to show up for an NVD training the week after? We're planning to do so tomorrow, but haven't gotten great turnouts in previous trainings. So what do y'all think of that? Thank you, Simon, for your question.
Simon, I think it's excellent that you are interrogating why people are not showing up to the trainings rather than just having more trainings. Because not too long ago, I was in a place where it's just like, we need to ask more people to come to the trainings rather than asking why they're not. So I think that, I'm going to say, it could be really appropriate for your campaign to ask folks to show up to an NVDA training. And I don't think the question is whether or not we should ask people to show up, but more of how are we pitching this training to the people, so even the language that you're using is accessible to the people that you want to be showing up, right? Because like sitting down and locking yourself to something is probably not a great way to encourage more people to engage with the campaign who just engaged the first time a week ago. And then once people are in the room, thinking about the content, right? This is like getting really good about the training part. How can the content that we give meet these people right where they're at with their engagement in the campaign and support them to take one more step a little bit farther, a little bit more risk, taking on a little bit more leadership? So what that might look like is some sort of like big, bold, center stage involvement in this direct action. But my guess is that for more people than not who are showing up to this training, they would be better suited in a role or some sort of engagement that is not, or some form of engagement that just offers them the next step. And I don't know your people because you know your people, but I think that inviting them to that training could be really appropriate. Sophia, do you have anything to add?
Not really. I think you did a great job there, P. I think I'm not sure how many people were at your action, but depending, if it wasn't too many, if it's a number that it would be manageable for you to have one-on-ones, or for someone in your core team to have one-on-ones with these people, that might be a great way to gauge whether that would be appropriate or not, just see where they're at. And since it sounds like you only have a week, that doesn't necessarily have to be a sit-down meal like what PD was saying, but maybe just a conversation or something to gauge where they're at.
Totally. I completely agree with Sophia and think that having that one-on-one contact can really help you gauge how interested folks are in getting more deeply involved. And that often, I know I've assumed in the past that someone's not really down to get involved, and that we have to take these small steps into engagement, where sometimes certain leaders will just like jump from signing a petition to like throwing down an action and getting involved in NVDA. And so not underestimating the amount of engagement that folks want to take can open up possibilities for people to feel like, wow, I can really just jump into this and I don't have to follow more of like a bureaucratic route to engaging with the campaign. I think I'd also just encourage you to ground in your goals and remember, like, what are you hoping to get out of this NVDA training? And if it's leading towards an action, which hopefully that's in the service of an action, then knowing how broad the base of folks you want to be actually taking arrestable action will help you determine those questions of like, how broadly should we be reaching out to people in terms of inviting them to that training? Thank you for your question, Simon.
So, we've been on a journey. We started in the place of where are we coming from and finding ourselves? How are we finding ourselves being able to pull off big actions and not growing our organizations? And we talked about the difference between building structure in our organizations with our core teams, or doing our best to provide the on-ramps into the campaign out of giant moments of momentum. And then we introduced and talked about Act, Recruit, Train as a tool, and we rooted that in my campaign. We've heard examples from Sophia's campaign, and we've even heard examples from your campaigns. We've gone through and we've gotten really clear on what we're talking about with Act, Recruit, Train, and Sophia just brought together these two really important tools of ladder of engagement and Act, Recruit, Train. And I want to like stay there for one more second, because I think that what she said is so important. And oh geez, Act, Recruit, Train. It's often that now we're really getting into the 2.0. This is the nuance. This is the nitty-gritty dirty stuff. Fossil-free CU, even after we learned that we needed to Act, Recruit, Train, right? So like last spring, we kind of got our butts handed to us. This fall, we were like, we're going to Act, Recruit, Train. We still weren't doing it well, because we're like, I don't get it. We have these actions, we have this recruitment, and people aren't showing up to our trainings. So Act, Recruit, Train, it's a cycle. There's 3 parts of it, but it's so simple because it's meant to be molded into the context and the form that you need it to take. And oftentimes when we talk about Act, Recruit, Train, we talk about being able to build the base that can take successively larger actions, or more people turning out to our actions, right? If we have 50 people turning out to our actions this week, by the end of the year, I want to be able to turn out 150 people. And that's really important. It is, and I'm not saying that it's not. And it's also super cool. But Act, Recruit, Train, when when brought together with the ladder of engagement, can also help us deepen the leadership that we already have. And in my mind, it almost becomes act, retain, train. Act, retain, train. So, and I just want to give an example of this. Remember that person we were talking about with the class reps, right? Like they're saying, I want a public speech, or I want to publicly speak about divestment. Like, cool, go give class reps. And you give them the training on what is the pitch that we give when we show up to class reps. And the next week, so that person goes off and they do it, and the next week that person comes back, and maybe you're like, you know what, you did such a great job that I want you to teach somebody else how to give that same class rep, right? So now they took action, you retained them in the organization, and now you're going to train them how to train somebody else. And it's quite possible that 2 or 3 weeks from then, that person who started giving class reps is now leading the class rep team for your organization, right? And it just took a couple of weeks. And we didn't add any people necessarily, but we're deepening the leadership within our organization. And I think that, Sophia, that was such an important point that it was like really worth hovering over. And other things, learnings that I have before we cap off in the next 3 minutes that I really want to share, and then open it up for Jess or Sophia, if you have anything to add, is that Act, Recruit, Train is, of course, it's best planned in advance. I shared how agonizing it is to get to the end of an action and then think about how we're going to retain and train people. So it's best planned into the strategy. But I'm saying that it's not too late. It's not too late for these escalated actions that we have coming up, because we still have plenty of time to build in these steps of organizational development that we want to use to funnel the energy out of our actions. And another learning that I have to share is that Act, Recruit, Train cycles, they're a mixed bag. Some of them, they come in big loops. They come in big loops. They happen over the course of a month. They happen over the course of 2 months, right? Of like people who might engage with the campaign a couple times a year. But they can also happen really quickly, right? So think about that person who's class repping. We're just going to go back to that person. That person's going to Act, Recruit, Train every single week. Or if there's a really excited leader in your campaign, that person could Act, Recruit, Train, Act, Retain, Train every single day, right? They're like, I just can't get enough of this. Give me more. And you can be using this as a way for people to take meaningful action and continue to develop themselves as leaders. And the last thing that I want to share, and almost like echo and bounce off of what Jess said about the NVDA training from I think was it Curtis or Simon's question? But
Simon, yeah.
Simon's question, great. Action, recruitment, training comes in all forms and shapes and sizes, right? I oftentimes think it's my gut to like bump down the level of like action and engagement. Like that's just where I go. It's like, oh, I can't ask too much of this something. But I think it's so refreshing that Jess says, no, wait, we don't want to underestimate the way that these people want to engage with the campaign. And if they want to go big, let them go big, and then give them the tools that they need to get there. So Jess, I'm wondering if you have anything to add to this, or Sophia, before we cap this off and add some next steps.
Yeah, thanks, PD. I think one thing I really want to emphasize as a part of this cycle is the training component, and that part of being able to give folks the on-ramps to really engage deeply as soon as possible with the campaign is doing really good training. And I really want to highlight what you just said, PD, about giving them the tools to be able to take those steps is so crucial, because as we know, with strategic action and campaigning, particularly engaging in nonviolent direct action and arrestable actions, we want to be sure that the folks who are entering into that are aligned in our purpose and our mission, what we believe and why we're taking action, and the story we want to tell with that, as well as the direct tools to actually engage in the action and not enter into the campaign too quickly and splinter what you've built over so many years that you all have been campaigning. And another point, just broadly on the importance of training in this cycle, is to ground that in your goals of where you want to be going long term. And think about how you can make that an experiential part of people coming into your campaign. That's not just about delivering information for them to absorb, but engaging them in practice and in bringing their own knowledge, maybe from past organizing experience, maybe just from living their lives, right, and being a member of the college community. What are some ways that they have been a witness of or an direct experience of climate injustice, environmental injustice, or disenfranchisement as a student in their campus community, and drawing on those to identify the ways that they can be powerful as a member of your campaign. So think about how, coming out of your action, what are the tools people need to plug in and to keep going forward, and how does that fit in within your broader strategy? And I'll pass it to Sophia. I'd love to hear if you have other things to highlight and examples as well.
No, I thought that all sounded really great. Yeah, I guess I'd just say that I really, this is a tool that's just super, super helped us in planning our strategy timeline for this semester. To be able, to like take a step back and say, we don't need to be just acting all the time, that this space in between also serves a really important purpose. And yeah, so I really encourage you all to take advantage of this as we go into Escalation this spring or continue with our campaigns.
And quickly before we hop off, I want to make sure that y'all that have shared examples in our Q&A, we can highlight the really cool things you're doing in your campuses. So Curtis from University of Puget Sound shared that they handed out dust masks at our last rally that said things like divest UPS and don't be a fossil fool. And then we asked them to wear them all day throughout campus and tell people how our investments pollute our education and how to get involved further. That's really awesome. I love that messaging. And then another one we have is from Angus, who's calling in from Australia at University of Melbourne. Thanks for joining us from across the world. He says that we gave people signs at our action that contained our message to stick up around the campus, and then we made sure that we had intentional conversations with people at the action and told them of how our workshops are coming up as a way to skill them up and get involved. So that's a really great example of having an action, directly recruiting people, and giving them an immediate way to plug in. That's really awesome. Thanks, y'all, for engaging and for watching.
So I'm going to close this out. This is such a great way to end the call because you people are so creative and exciting, and the things that you do that I pick up and read online in the news is just like, oh, it makes my heart pound. And I am getting so excited about the round of escalations. I mean, it seems like they haven't stopped. We escalated last spring, and then Stanford, and then MIT, and now we're going into more escalations. They just haven't stopped. But there's going to be a big one. And I'm so excited about what's coming up in just a few weeks, because there are so many, as y'all have clearly demonstrated, brilliant young people working so hard and with so much dedication in this movement, and we're already building beautiful things together. We're building beautiful campaigns, we're building beautiful actions, and these relationships are really important. But we need to continue growing and challenging ourselves and challenging each other to become smarter and more powerful organizers. So integrating this tool, I think, is one step that's been important for me into your plans that are coming up. So I challenge you. I think one great way to like bring this back to your campaign, and this will be it is being recorded, and we can share the link so other people who have not yet had the chance to see this right now should definitely watch it if you found it to be useful. And take 10 minutes after this webinar, either by yourself or with your campaign if y'all have been watching it together, or when everybody eventually gets the chance to watch it, to think about how act, recruit, and train cycle can help you squeeze more out of the actions that you are already planning. This isn't like stack more on top of your busy lives. This is how can we make the most of what we're already doing. So how can you engage and incorporate the people that you'll be turning out to your actions in a way that makes the most sense for them and the most sense for your campaign and where you're at? And with that, I close this out, and Jess is going to give you the lowdown on the rest of the webinars that are coming out in this series of support.
Actually, Sophia's going to give the lowdown. Thanks, Sophia.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, so I just wanted to remind you all to tune in to our next webinar. It's next week at the same time. and it's going to be on reinvestment and escalation, and I'm sure it will be awesome, so I hope you can make it.
And keep a lookout for that link that'll be coming out again just like this week. It'll be at the same time. And please do remember to share out the recording with members of your campaign. We'll be keeping an archive of all the webinars from this spring on the DSN's website, so make sure you visit us at studentsdivest.org. Thanks, y'all, for tuning in. And thanks so much for PD and Sophia doing an awesome job sharing on the art cycle.
Thanks, everyone.